I'm interested in poems that amplify unheard voices. And also mark the condition of marginality. The margin is not the margin to the margin. Sand opera, one of the books I'll read a bit from, was the sound of my listening. In it, I stumbled upon a method that was both choral and counter-forensic. I explored the architecture of oppression, right down to a Yemeni prisoner's sketches of black sites, the secret prisons where he was tortured. Yet the book's journey was also into listening, into sitting with the voices of others and my own, into our own human being, and creaturely being, I should say here. Poetry is the power to listen to oneself and to others, to create a space where being together happens. Perhaps it's true that, as Seamus Heaney once said, no lyric has ever stopped a tank. But as my friend Dave Lucas once said, we don't know the futures that our poems create. The ripple effect of a good poem is the opposite of a bomb's concussion wave. It buoys us in its bracing music, whatever hurt it bears, holding us momentarily aloft, occupying us, breathing us, carrying us into our ever-not sameness. This is a little ode to the sound and the language of Arabic. This is from a wedding poem for my sister who married a Palestinian man. Because there is a word for love in this tongue that entwines two people as one. And there is a word for love in this tongue that nests in the chambers of the heart. And a word for love in this tongue that wanders the earth. For love in this tongue in which you lose yourself in this tongue. And a word that carries sorrow within its vowels. And a word for love that exudes from your pores. And a word for love that shares its name with falling. I want to thank my parents who are in the back, supporters of poetry. Very grateful that they could come out to this and that they've always supported my crazy idea that poetry mattered and that I could maybe make a life out of it, so I really appreciate that. So in this book, Sand Opera, it's basically a series of poems meditating on certain aspects of this post-9/11 world in which we find ourselves, that's sort of terror years. And one of the people I want to bring into this room is a guy named Mohamedou Ould Slahi, who is a prisoner, a Yemeni prisoner, still in Guantanamo Bay Prison, never been charged with a crime. He's been there for 14 years. He, among many other prisoners, was subjected to cruel and unusual treatment, including constant exposure to light and sound, music, as a way essentially of torture. Of course, it didn't leave any marks on the body, but it clearly leaves marks in the mind. And that's the sinister nature of our imagination, our imperial imagination, that we could find ways of hurting people without showing it on their bodies. So one of the crazy things that happened is that they didn't just play what, noisy music or music that one typically find perhaps depressing. I don't know, like heavy metal or death metal or something. I don't know. They played music like the Sesame Street theme song and the Barney theme song, which, I don't know. It's hard to hate Barney, particularly if you have kids. You understand Barney if you have kids. The purple dinosaur, I mean, come on. So this is from Mohamedou Ould Slahi, whom we're thinking about here, and who we want to have justice. In the cell of else, in the pitch white, someone's hand shackled between ankles in the nights and sunny days, keeping the clouds shaking the ribcage and no way to keep the music from entering and breaking the body. Said, let the body sit. Barney is a dinosaur. This is the touching without being touched. This is the being without silence. From our imagination, in wave upon wave, in a shipping container, and I love you, in a box of shock, you love me, in a cemented dream. We're a happy family, with a great big hug and chains that leave no mark. Won't you say you love me too? I think the book finally came together when I started writing about my daughter witnessing the war sort of through the mass media. And it was at that point that I realized that that experience of trying to deal with what it means to bring children into a world of violence became really clear to me. And also how closely they listen, not only to things like the radio, but their father yelling at the radio for mispronouncing the names of countries and the like. So she asks, is that man crying or singing? How should I answer? War takes him in its fingers, raises his body, a punctured bone flute to its lips, and breathes the living dust to dust alone. This is the air we scull, air of ancestors and ash pits. Just 5, the child's baptized into this unhappiness. She corrects the voices she hears, butcher the name of the country she's never seen. It's Iraq, not Iraq. This is actually inspired a little bit by my dad, she sort of received this in a way from my dad, some of this wisdom in here. So this is the wisdom of children via the wisdom of grandparents, I suppose. What does it mean, I say? She says, it means to be quiet, just by yourself. She says, there's a treasure chest inside. You get to dig it out. Somehow it's spring. Says, will it always rain? In some countries, I say, they are praying for rain. She asks, why do birds sing? In the dream, my notebook dipped in water, all the writing lost. Says, read the story again. But which one? That which diverts the mind is poetry. Says, you know those planes that hit those buildings? Asks, why do birds sing? When the storm ends, she stops, holds her hands together, closes her eyes. What are you doing? I'm praying for the dead worms. Says, listen. This is the last poem in the book. It's called Compline, which is a night prayer. I riff on the book of Isaiah in here. It's one of my favorites. It's also a bit of in a way, it's a poem of waiting, of expectation. An Advent kind of poem, too. So. Compline. Hey, how's it going over there? She just started moving around a little bit. Compline. That we await a blessed hope, and that we will be struck with great fear, like a baby taken into the night. That every boot, every improvised explosive, talon and hornet, Molotov and rubber-coated bullet, every unexploded cluster bomblet, every Kevlar and suicide vest, and unpiloted drone raining fire on wedding parties will be burned as fuel in the dark season. That we will learn the awful hunger of God, the nerve-fraying cry of God, the curdy vomit of God, the soiled swaddle of God, the constant wakefulness of God, alongside the sweet scalp of God, the contented murmur of God, the limp-twitched dream reaching of God. We're dizzy in every departure, limb lost. We cannot sleep in the wake of God, and God will not sleep the infant dream for long. We lift the blinds, look out into ink for light. My God, open the spine, binding our sight. I'll read 2 poems from Pictures at an Exhibition, which is a not only a Mussorgsky piece, but kind of an occasion to put together a series of poems about traveling in St. Petersburg in Russia. The Roma people always kind of amazed and terrified me at first when I first lived there, because they lived so differently than everyone, and their pain was so performed in a way that made me feel like maybe no pain could be salved. But this last time I went, actually this was in 2002, I met a Roma who was like, I can give you good luck, she's saying in Russia, you know, like, give me a little bit of money and all of your sins will be forgiven. I'm like, all right, I'm into that. So when you meet the Roma at the river, your face translates for river and ever, translates your fate. Sign her your sins and ever forgive her. Sings she your sins, pay her your pay for debtors' endeavor to spit in the river. Your sins will be and severed forever, spat into the river. Unlike the river, a mirror reflecting its framing forever. Your sins will be just spit in the river. You'll probably live. If you're interested in them, there's a great book about the Roma people called Bury Me Standing. It's a really beautiful book. Recommend it. There's a prison in Russia that dates back at least a couple hundred years called Kresti Prison, Crosses Prison. And outside Kresti Prison, even today, you can find women signing to their spouses or children or sons in the beyond the high walls of the prison, literally making words with their hands. And it's such an amazing thing to witness, people communicating with each other from the outside to the inside. And so this is in a way kind of an ode to one of these women. I think this one was signing to herself. Outside Kresti Prison, a woman conducts a movement for clouds in the key of Cyrillic. After each flourish, returns her finger to its original position and pauses to watch for the locked beyond stone walls to beckon. The prison like a clock stopped in gnawing. The empty courtyard orchestra pit of dumpster and clothesline. Her language an arrow, arcing an invisible word made marrow. In the far barred window, a hand she could find in a photograph of hands, flagging, understand, I understand. Smoke sphere of cigarette delivered from lungs she once breathed for. How long can she stand under and sign her life on this invisible line? I'd like to maybe read a couple poems from this book of translations I did with a friend, Dmitry Surtsev. I Burned at the Feast. This is the father of the great cinematographer Andrei Tarkovsky. This is Arseny Tarkovsky. If you're a film buff, you know about his work. And so he lived in the 20th century, survived the entire communist era, and died basically when it was falling apart. But so his poems are a very spiritual testament to how to survive in difficult times. He generated a lot of his imagery and illusions from not only the Bible but other spiritual traditions. So in that way he was quite radical given the state of Christianity at that time in Russia. Oh, if only I could rise, regain memory and consciousness, and at the most difficult hour, bless the labor that reared the meadows and nurtured the orchards, and one last time swallow the crystal brain of water from a concave sheet of a downy leaf. Give me one drop, my mortal grass, an oath to inherit speech, to grow a larynx not sparing blood, to forget myself, and tearing up my words, burn your parched mouth with my fire. Sometimes I can't sleep at night. There was an Onion headline, something like, man gets up at 3 a.m. to write down his disturbing dream yet again, or something like that. I thought, how do they know my life? And see, he wrote this sort of slightly sardonic, but also a poignant poem about what gets inside the poems and what stays outside them. Their commas exact and sensible, poems slip into publication. But my insomniac monologue doesn't see itself inside that spine. It's really not my book. It's floating without oars into the far rapids, some boat I left untied at the pier. It rides on the shoulders of unfamiliar but faithful friends. Let it carry their past like snuffed candles until we meet again. This is his last poem, which where I got the title from. I burned the feast. I don't know. I always feel like I need to read this one because I like it so much. I think it's partly about the hope. It's the recognition of our mortality, but also the hope that our words outlive us. My sight, which was my power, now blurs. 2 invisible diamond spears. My hearing subsides, full of ancient thunder and the breathing of my father's house. These knots of thick muscles slacken like gray oxen lying upon the plowed field. The wings behind my shoulders yield no light when evening darkens. I am a candle. I burned at the feast. Gather my wax when morning arrives, so that this page will remind you how to be proud and how to weep, how to give away the last third of happiness, and how to die with ease, and beneath a temporary roof to burn posthumously like a word. I got one more for you here somewhere. Another kind of prayer poem in honor of the occasion. It's called Prayer. And there's something about prayer which is interesting to me, and particularly prayer of petition, which is we're asking in some sense, and so there's a sort of ego involvement there, but ultimately, if we really believe, why do we need to ask for anything? So there's, in a way, the me in this poem is the struggle of our self between our desire and our spirit, maybe, or desire within our spirit. Prayer. Wither me to within me, welt me to wheel me common again, withdraw to wear me weary, over me to hover and lover again. Before me to form and perform me, round me to rill me liquid incisions, behind me to hunt and haunt me, down me to drown indecision. Bury me to seed me, bloom me and loam me, grind me to meal me, knead me to rise, raise me to your mouth, rive me to river me, end me to unmend me, rend me to render me. Thanks.